colonel, so I like was at the top for 6 years and at the bottom for 6 years, so it was like average. But at the top, as a colonel, I was treated like royalty, of course. And there, you come in the room, everybody has to stand up, and as a private, you're just at the bottom and all that. But when I was a private, in both places, they had classes. And in basic training, as a private, everybody had to hold their rifle. They were like teaching you can never be without your rifle. You never put your rifle. So you hold your rifle. And we would have 8 hours of classes. In fact, as an officer even, we'd have 8 hours of classes. Because somebody said, a work day is 8 hours. So by the time 8 hours of classes, 50 minutes, a 10-minute break, 50 minutes, 10-minute break, after 4 hours, you have lunch for an hour, then anyway, everybody holding your rifle, people would get tired and sleepy, and the great sin in the military is to drop your rifle. And everybody, you'd be half asleep, and you'd be hearing them, talk, and then suddenly you'd hear, clink, clink. Somebody dropped their rifle, and then everybody would look. And then the sergeant would run down, point at the guy, some of you in the military, what did you do, Soul Trooper? I dropped my rifle, Sergeant! And anyway, to drop your rifle meant you had to now go outside and carry, that was a 9-pound M1, holding it over your head. You had to run around the block, which was like a quarter mile, screaming out loud. And if you didn't scream, they'd make you do it again. So you drop, and you had to scream, I dropped my best friend. I dropped my best friend. You're right. I dropped my best friend. And so what woke everybody up it was the relief that it wasn't you. And some poor guy and now a girl had to run around like that. Anyway, I don't think I'm more than I am, but I'm happy to be after, and anybody wants to take a picture, I'm happy to do that. I went to an all-boys high school. We never saw a girl there. And I went to a Boy Scout troop that had all boys.
Oh, wow.
And then in the Army, at that time, basically, they were all men. So I had, never been almost near a girl. I had no sisters.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
So this is heavenly. Okay. I handed you a paper, and you can fill it out later or not, but at least I want to point out certain things, especially for the exam and such. And on the paper, and what I'm going to do in our last hour is for half an hour, I'm going to go over the map and this paper, and then the last half hour, I'm going to go over the questions of the test, to make sure at least I give you the knowledge that I cover all these items.
Which one are you?
Pardon me?
Which one are you?
The Israel map. So it's the Israel map. And you don't have to have everything, but see my own copy. First, the cities and the coast. This is geography. So looking at the cities of the coast, in block, and we used to say read right up. You go right over, but I'll just name the block, that's easy. In block D1, D delta D1, you see on the top there, you see in D1, the top mark on the coast is the city of Sidon. There's Sidon and Tyre. And they're mentioned in the Bible. Sidon is the top one in block D1. Below it is Tyre. And that's up, of course, in Lebanon. Sidon is actually today in Syria. And you don't have to know this, I don't ask this, but in the block D1, the Litani River is what goes between. Alexander the Great conquered Tyre. It was an island, and he built a causeway out there. And the coast in block D2, Delta 2, The coast, that would be the Phoenician plain, the Phoenician coast. The Phoenicians were, remember we said the coastal plain? Well, up in block D2, it's Phoenicia, the Phoenicians who gave us the earliest alphabet. I'm not going to mention everything, but just the Mount Carmel is right here in block C3. You see, today it's the city of Haifa. The city of Haifa is really on Mount Carmel. The city of Haifa, where they have the university, the Technion, but that's Haifa. Haifa is the largest harbor in Israel. Israel proper. The other great harbor is down on the Gaza Strip, Ashkelon. Ashkelon is the great harbor. That would be, Ashkelon is the coastal city in B7. In B7, there's a dot in the center of the block. You see B7? And that's the harbor of Ashkelon. If you take a cruise and they stop at Israel, they will probably stop at Ashkelon because Haifa's too busy. The cruise boats come to Ashkelon, you get on a bus, and they bus you when you go to Jerusalem or wherever, they bus up to the Sea of Galilee. But you'll go to Ashkelon on the coast. Tel Aviv is in C, right in the line between 5 and 6. Tel Aviv is between 5 and 6, and you see there's like a little circle between blocks on the line between 5 and 6 in C, block C on the coast. That was Joppa originally. It was Joppa, and you remember yesterday we said it was settled, and it's now Tel Aviv, Valley of Spring. We see the Philistine cities. Ashdod is in block 6B. 6B, the very bottom dot on the right side, in the right corner. 6B, Bravo, the dot inland on the right corner, the lower right corner is Ashdod, one of the Philistine cities. To the right of it, or the west of it, in block 6C, is Ekron. And these are the Philistine cities. Do you need one, Tommy?
No, okay.
Well, you're good. Okay. And he doesn't have to take an exam.
No,
I get to grade them.
yeah, gets to grade them. Don't have to.
In the map, you'll see there's going from A and B on the coast, and in fact, well, let's look first in block 7B. 7B, the bottom dot in 7B is Gaza. Yes, Bravo 7. 7B, the bottom dot is Gaza, and the dot above it is Ashkelon. But you'll notice that whole strip where you see Gaza, and it goes down into 8B and 8A. That little area there, the whole area, that's the Gaza Strip. And that's where there's all the trouble. And it'd be nice if everybody loved one another and Israel just let everybody come out. But sometimes there's like 200 rockets a day fired out of the Gaza Strip. So the problem is when they let people in, somebody brings a bomb. So it's the old story. There's probably, and I used to walk through these areas freely, and the Arabs were wonderful. We had no trouble. But everybody's stirred up now, unfortunately. And while 99 out of 100 are peaceful people and should be treated wonderfully, somebody comes in every time they open the gates with a bomb and blows somebody up, and so then they shut the gates again, and it's unhappy. And the Hamas, of course, wants the trouble. By the way, Hamas is a group that they love the war. Some people love battle. They love the struggle. They love the war. They've sworn to annihilate Israel. So So no peace treaty is good enough, and they don't want the peace treaties. They want the explosion and the battle, and they want to kill everybody. And as long as you have somebody like that, you know, you just can't make peace. It's a problem. But that's the Gaza Strip. But Gaza, we notice the city is, you know, in 7B at the bottom. Gaza is like the rain line. Basically, at Gaza and below, it doesn't rain. Certain areas are blessed by rain. The United States, you know, central United States is the breadbasket of the Western world, at least of North America. So many things grow. A lot of rain, good soil, it grows. Wheat grows in Canada. Greece, Italy, France, good soil, a lot of rain. Those countries are rich, things grow. Certain things, now when you get to certain points, like in East Africa, animals, things grow. But you get to certain points north of the Sahara Desert, the lower Sudan, Central African Republic, no rain. So those people have been poor. And it's not really, there's a lot, geography actually determines much of the wealth of the world, and such Americans are basically, everybody here is an immigrant, or you've been dragged here against your will, but we live in a, you know, there's a lot, my father came as an immigrant from Russia because of persecution against the Jews and such. But now, notice the butterfly in the center of your map, mainly in D, in the row D in the center. D4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Do you see it looks like the left wing of a butterfly? The left wing of a butterfly, it goes like that. That's called the West Bank. That butterfly, the left wing there of the butterfly, is the West Bank. And the central city there in block 6D, 6D Delta, is Jerusalem. See that? That's Jerusalem in 6 Delta. Now, the West Bank, years ago, when I was younger, I used to go through the West Bank. There was no problem at all. No problem at all. Everybody would sell you trinkets and all that. There was no hatred. That's the West Bank. Now, in 1947, the League of Nations, then later the United Nations, when they carved out Israel, they said, remember this side, Jordan, what country is to the east of Israel mainly? It's Jordan, the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan. And by the way, King Abdullah, we have King Abdullah I, and we had King Hussein, who was really like the only sensible guy in the Middle East. Not to be confused with Hussein of Iraq, but King Hussein of Jordan, who married an American wife, remember? And who was an Arab. King Hussein, and then now we have King Abdullah II, a young guy who's really pro-West, which is good. But King Abdullah of Jordan has Amman, see the capital? King Abdullah said, we can get along with the Jews. 2 days later, he was shot to death. So, see, that's the problem. He said, we can get along with Israel. 2 days later, he's shot to death. Sadat made a treaty, remember President Carter, and he made a treaty with Israel, Egypt. He made a treaty with Israel, and he was shot to death at a public parade. So, you know, it's a sinful world. So it's very hard to make it. But anyway, they gave to the Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, they gave this butterfly called the West Bank. They gave that butterfly of land to Jordan, and the way they cut it at that time, actually I have Jerusalem in the Israeli side, but it's really part of Jerusalem. Much of it is on the Arab side. And Jordan, Syria, and Egypt invaded Israel in 1967, and they were defeated by Israel in what we call the Six-Day War, and Israel took Jerusalem, the soldiers, and the West Bank. So, you see, what we're saying is this. The United Nations gave the West Bank, this part of Israel, this is the part that Joshua conquered. This part right here, they gave to the country of Jordan. Now that is not traditionally Jordan. There was no country Jordan. Jordan was a country invented after the First World War by Britain and France. See, they made the boundaries. That's why, by the way, ISIL has changed the name from ISIS to ISIL. Instead of the Iraqi state Islamic State of Iraq and Syria, they changed it to the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Levant means the whole Middle East. In other words, they said, why are we saying Iraqi State of Iraq and Syria? They said the British and French made those boundaries. We don't like them. We want the whole land. So it's called now the Iraqi State of, the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Levant's the old word for the whole Middle East. And anyway, they gave this land, the League of Nations, to Jordan. But when Jordan invaded Israel, they lost it in the war, so Israel has taken it since 1967. So that's why you'll hear certain groups saying, well, we want to go back to the boundaries of 67. But Israel says, we didn't invade you, you invaded us to kill us all, but we won the land and Jerusalem, first time in 2,000 years, and we're afraid to give you back the land because you're going to attack us again. And they did again in the Yom Kippur War in 73. So there's unhappiness. Jerusalem, the word Jerusalem never appears in the Koran. But in other Islamic writings, the writings say that Muhammad, duplicates the ascension of Christ. Muhammad went on a horse to Barak. He went to Jerusalem in a dream, and he ascended into heaven. So Muhammad in a dream ascended from Jerusalem. So Jerusalem is like the fourth holiest city in the Islamic world. Mecca, Medina, and Baghdad and Jerusalem. And so as long as we have Islamic people swearing, we'll never give up all Jerusalem, and Israelis saying, we'll never give up Jerusalem, it's hard to work out a peace. You'd like to say, let them both own it. And that's been done in the past, but that's the way it is now. So we have that there. Let's see, the big city, so we've seen the West Bank. You want to know the West Bank? Oh, by the way, I should tell you this. Here, it was given to what country, the West Bank? Jordan. In the 1980s, King Hussein, not to be confused with the Hussein of Iraq, King Hussein of Jordan said, and his wife, they said, enough Jordanian people have died for that piece of sand called the West Bank. But it's the center, promised land. They said, King Hussein shocked the world. He said, we no longer claim it. Anybody can have it. And suddenly, so you see, why are they fighting so much about it? Well, King Hussein, who was given it by the League of Nations, and then by the United Nations, the League of Nations became the United Nations, King Hussein said, we don't want it anymore. He said, we've been involved in 2 wars, we've lost thousands of boys, and it's just a piece of sand anyway, we don't want it. And so, when he said, we don't want it anymore, it leaves it for everybody. So suddenly we have a group called the Palestinians. They say, we claim it. And the Israelis say, well, it's the promised land. We claim it. And unfortunately, they've not worked it out because bombs make hatred and all of that. But, so it's really unclaimed. Jordan does not claim it anymore. That's why it's open for Palestinians or Israelis to be there. In the millennium, it'll be happy. Let me mention the Sea of Galilee and the New Testament. I should mention a couple of things about that. You should know, in the Sea of Galilee, I've got 4, shall we say, towns around the Sea of Galilee, which is in E3, Echo 3, the Sea of Galilee. And the Sea of Galilee, let's go from the bottom dot of the Sea of Galilee. That's Tiberias. Tiberias, that's about the 8 o'clock position. Migdalia is on the 9 o'clock position on the Sea of Galilee, the left side, Migdalia. Tiberias, Migdalia. Then up at the 11 o'clock position is Capernaum. Jesus' second year of ministry was mainly, it was the great Galilean ministry. He did many miracles in Capernaum. If you visit Israel, there's a synagogue there. And he upgraded the city of Chorazin. And Chorazin is the northernmost dot in E3. The top dot in E3, and you spell it anyway, C-H-O-R-A-Z-I-N, but anything, chorus. Chorazin is right there above the Sea of Galilee, the top dot on the map. And at the 1 o'clock position is Bethsaida. Bethsaida at the 1 o'clock position. And remember, the Lord said, oh, Chorazin, Bethsaida, it'll be worse for you than in the city of Nineveh at the judgment because of the miracles and works you have seen from God, and yet you still reject. So he upbraided those cities. And so we have what you want to know, for the test and for life, is that Tiberias is at the 8 o'clock position. That's the big town today. If you go to stay in Galilee, you'll stay in a hotel in Tiberias. And it's mixed Arab and Jewish. And Capernaum is at the 11 o'clock. That's the two you want to know. Capernaum at the 11, where that was Jesus' headquarters in Galilee. And Tiberias is the Roman city. The Jews, when they were mad, the Jews that were mad at the Romans did not want to say the name Tiberias. Or they call it Tiberia. Romans would add the U.S. for a Latin name, Tiberias. They would say Tiberia. So the Jews would mispronounce it and call it Toveria. Tov in Hebrew means good. So they call it the good place, Toveria. And, when they deal with the Romans soldiers were probably listening to how they pronounced it. Hey, it's Tiberia. I said Toveria. And it was, it was people who, they're just mad at the Romans. They think the Romans stole their land, so they don't want to say Tiberia. They say Toveria, meaning the good place. So, thus is human nature and such. Capernaum, we said, is Kepher Nahum. Kepher means village. Nahum is a man's name. So it's the village of Nahum. Kepher Nahum, and we pronounce it Capernaum. How did they really pronounce it in those days? No one on the planet knows. The Pope doesn't know. The President of the United States doesn't know. Bruce isn't sure. Because we don't have recorders. We have the spelling. So it must have been something like Tiberias, and it must have been something like Capernaum, probably Capernaum. But, we don't fight over your exact pronunciation. But you should know that. I think already I said the river that is in block 3F that comes out of the Jordan. The river that comes out of the Jordan right there is the Yarmouk River, the Yarmouk. And that's in block 3E and 3F. And now it flows into the Jordan. And the river that's in block 5, E and F, is the Jabbok. That's the Jabbok. And the river that flows into the Dead Sea, in the middle of the Dead Sea, in block 8, E and F, is the Arnon. So we have the Arnon, in the middle of the Jabbok, and at the top the Yarmouk. Now this is, over here, it's like mountain, cliffs. But everywhere you need water. So in Jacob's time, they talked about wells. Beersheba is, Beersheba, beer, that's where we get the word beer. Beer means well in Hebrew, and in Arabic too. Beer means well. Sheva means 7 or oath. It's the same word in Hebrew. In other words, you 7 something. See, 7 was like the sacred number. So we have a word swear, and we have a word 7. They don't sound alike. If you have 7 Indians, you've got 7. If you swear something, you swear. But in Hebrew, it's the same word. You 7 it, and what did you say? You 7 it. You sheva, 7, 7. Same word. So Beersheba is the well of, and we're not sure if it's the well of the oath, somebody swore something about it, or it's the well of 7. 7 people dug it or something like that. But it's Beersheba. And we have that. Let's see, is there anything? This area, of course, was called Galilee. This is called Galilee. Some books will say Upper Galilee and Lower Galilee. Now, here's the Armageddon region. You see this? Armageddon. Armageddon, in the Old Testament, the Valley of Jezreel. Now, they fought great battles here. Why did they fight battles here? Because here it's mountains. Mountains, you can't really fight a great battle on the mountain. In the Civil War, they had the Battle of Gettysburg all around some big hills. But basically, an army would go, and whoever got there first would get on one side of the mountains and wait. And here's a flat land. You can imagine. A something like 40 miles by 20 miles. Napoleon said it was the greatest battlefield he ever saw. It's a plain, and now there's farming in it, but it's still flat. And if you're going to fight a war in Israel, where are you going to fight? Where are you going to land your soldiers? You're not going to land them on the top of the mountains. You're not going to land them in the valleys. You're not going to land them in the Dead Sea. You're going to land them in the flat land to assemble. And the flat land is right here, the Valley of Jezreel, or what we call Armageddon. Armageddon. This is the Valley of Armageddon. It's real. I remember when I was down here, I asked an Israeli soldier. I had rented a car. I said, Apho Har Megiddo. It's called Mount Megiddo. It's the Mount Megiddo Valley. I said, Apho, where? Where is it? Apho Har Megiddo. He didn't say, oh, that's an imaginary place at the end of the rainbow. I remember he said, Yamin, straight ahead. Yamin is, it goes straight. Or Yashar. Yashar, straight. He said, just go up there and you're going to hit it. Now, there's the fortified city of Megiddo. And there's a great place to visit if you go to Israel. Megiddo, Solomon fortified Megiddo. He made a circle town with a big wall around it so he could send soldiers to Armageddon. King Saul died. Where did he die? He died at Armageddon. He died on Mount Gilboa, which is on the north side of Armageddon. Mount Megiddo's in the south, but in between you've got this 20 by 40 mile area where soldiers can fight. They're not going to fight in the top of the mountains. They're not going to fight in the cliffs of Golani. The great battles, as I say, Saul died really in Armageddon, in Gilboa, Har Gilboa, and such. Now, it's named because the chief city in this right here, the southwest, is called Megiddo. Megiddo, and the Hebrew word for hill or mountain. They use the same. In the Old Testament, wherever it's translated hill, you could say mountain. Wherever it's translated mount, you could say hill. See, in the United States, we have a different, we have a word called hill and a word mountain. But in the Old Testament, they don't have any Mount Everest, So it's one word, Har. H-A-R. Har means hill or mountain. And the translators, you can pick whichever one you want at the place. If it's high, you might say mount. If it's low, you would say hill, but it's Har in Hebrew. But anyway, the valley The great ancient battlefield, which is also called the Valley of Jezreel, mentioned many times in the Old Testament, is named for the big city on the southwest called Megiddo, Har Megiddo. So it's the Har Megiddo Valley. Now, in Revelation 16:16, says, and it's like 14:14, 16:16, 18:18 refers to Armageddon. Now, in the New Testament, the word comes out Armageddon. Now, it says he gathers them together into a place called Armageddon. Now, that in Hebrew would be the valley of Mount Megiddo. Now, why it says Armageddon